It's time to stop. This is not okay. This needs to stop now. This is cancer. This is so much cancer that I can feel the tumors growing on my back. And it's weighing down heavy on me, and it's not okay. It's time to stop, okay? No more.
So when I hit record on this video, I know right away, that this is going to be the most controversial video I have ever made in the history of my channel up until this point. Looking at social media, there are very clearly two sides to this issue. I am very much on one side, and there are a lot of people very much on another side. I'm going to present my side of this argument as clearly and as respectfully as possible. And I'm well aware that you guys have an opinion out there too. I'm welcoming all comments. I welcome the dislikes and the unsubscribers that are sure to come from this video. But all I ask is that if you have an opinion, put it in the comments, be respectful. I'm also going to really try not to sling any mud or throw too many people under the bus. I know I made a comment on Instagram about Denny Hamlin, and I think that was fairly unfair. So I'm going to walk back some of my comments on that. I think that what happened tonight was a product created by NASCAR, and it was pretty much exactly what either NASCAR wants or what NASCAR thinks the fans want. And based on the social media reaction that I saw across Facebook, across Twitter, and across Instagram, it seems that, again, there are two sides to the story. So the first side, that seems to be the people out there who think this was the greatest NASCAR race that has ever been run. The greatest one ever. There were big packs. There was tight racing. There were huge blocks. There were great saves. There were huge wrecks. Huge wrecks. Chase Elliott got in the wall so hard. It was a huge, so much carnage, so much unpredictability. The stages were awesome. Everybody was racing so hard throughout the entire race. And then it came down to that last overtime finish where you had two guys going in and down the back straightaway, and Austin Dillon wasn't going to lift. He was going to push he was going to go through Almirola one way or the other. He was going to be like the intimidator. It was the 1979 Daytona 500 all over again, and the 3-car went back to victory lane for the first time in 20 years. And then there's the people like me who looked at it and said, that's not racing. To me, and this is my opinion here. If you have a race which is a survival race, a race of attrition that isn't brought on by pushing technology to limits, pushing cars to limits, pushing tire technology to limits, a race of attrition that the only real attrition is crashes caused by cars being too close and drivers making really stupid moves early on in the race. And then it comes down to an overtime, which this Daytona 500 did not go 500 miles. Everybody knows this at this point. Virtually every Daytona 500 in recent memory has come down to an overtime finish. But the Daytona 500 isn't 500 miles. And in that last few laps, you have Austin Dillon Austin Dillon is blocked after getting a run by Bubba Wallace, and is blocked by Aric Almirola, who was the leader, who was obviously unable to hold his lead because of the restrictor plate style of racing, in which the car and the driver really doesn't matter. It's all about your push. It's about your luck. It's about avoiding the wreck. And then as he blocks, trying desperately to hold on to the lead, doing the only thing a driver in the front really can do, which is block, he gets run into the back of by Austin Dillon, which, again, I don't put any real blame on Austin Dillon. He did what he had to do. Unfortunately, this style of racing, to me, is not racing. And this is the thing that I said on Twitter, is that if you think that was a good race, you and I are diametrically opposed on what we think good racing is. And this is a big problem with NASCAR now. You have half the fans that think this Daytona 500 was the greatest thing in the entire world, and then you have fans like myself who think it was a farce. So what's the right thing here? What are we looking at here? To me, I don't blame drivers. I don't blame Austin Dillon, and I don't blame Aric Almirola. Now, sure, Aric Almirola blocked, and Austin Dillon ran through him. But like I stated earlier, it wasn't their doing. It was an intentional wreck, but it's accepted by the drivers, and Austin Dillon even said this as much, and so did Aric Almirola, to his credit, is that when it comes down to the last lap of the Daytona 500, it is now established that you run over the person, whoever's in your way, and you wreck them, because that's the only way you're going to be able to win. You can't pass them under the yellow line because you get your win taken away. You can't drive by them because they'll probably block you. And once they block you, you have to lift or you run into the bumper of them. You're going to lose momentum, and because of the restrictor plate, you can't get it back by the start-finish line. So I look at all these things that have piled up together. Overtime finishes, stage racing, plate racing, yellow line rule. All these things converged in this moment. And this is kind of a crossing point for NASCAR. This was the kind of race that will turn a lot of fans off and turn a lot of fans on, to be fair. And I'm not sure which side is going to win, honestly. But I think for the health of NASCAR, plate racing especially, but really the culture of NASCAR in general, has to change. It has to. There were so many torn up cars in this race. I mean, during part of the race, the kind of the after the William Byron incident, which packed the field up for a restart, and there was some really pretty intense racing. I'll give it credit. Really exciting with small teams like Matt DiBenedetto up there, Brendan Gaughan, and it was really exciting to cheer for those people, thinking, man, they've got a shot here. And then the wreck happened. And you see all these small teams' budgets go up in smoke. You see their cars get destroyed. And it hit me at that point. Just the unbelievable amounts of carnage that we see. And we saw it 3 times today, 3 pretty sizable accidents during this race, which tore up so many race cars. And you have to think this is millions of dollars in damage. Millions. Is there really the money to sustain something like this? And if you think about it, when you go to a place like even Martinsville these days, think how much in recent memory there have been intentional wrecks, guys absolutely, literally crashing each other to win races, not even in absolutely disrespectful ways as far as I'm concerned. You look at the Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott example, or even further, you go to Matt Kenseth and Joey Logano in 2015, guys causing enormous wrecks to try to win the race or screw other guys out of not winning a race. Is that racing? I don't like to think it is. But here we are. We're here at this crossroads where equipment, there's people out there, and there's a certain... The fan that NASCAR seems to be chasing is the fan that loves wrecks, wants desperately to see a lot of wrecks. A race isn't good unless it's had a big one. 10 cars has to be taken out. Somebody has to flip. There's demolition derbies for a reason, folks. And I'm sorry. NASCAR still is the premier series in the United States. It's the biggest one. And a lot of times it comes down to a farcical ending where there's a huge wreck, most of the field gets taken out, and we're lucky if it's actually a racing deal and not something intentional. Is that, let's take a look at ourselves in the mirror here and say, is that the image we want for racing? Is that really the image? It makes me, it's unbelievable. And yes, it does. It's not just a NASCAR rules package thing. Because like I said, this stuff happens at Martinsville. It happens at Kansas. It happens at Indianapolis. So this is drivers needing to respect themselves, and the NASCAR rules makers have to fix the plate racing. I mean, I can't imagine the team owners are happy. And I saw Chip Ganassi specifically on Twitter mentioning that it's like getting teeth pulled to be an owner on a plate track. And I feel for them. I feel for the drivers. I mean, it's ridiculous. And not to mention, what if somebody gets hurt one of these days in a plate race? It's certainly possible. You take that many chances with that many big accidents, and it's bound to happen at some point. It's just ridiculous. So here we go. The stages, here's the thing. I do want to talk about stages real quick, just kind of in a general race review sense. It's interesting to me that the people who defend stages are also the ones that complain the most loudly about the single file racing that we saw throughout the last stage of this race. And a lot of it is because they really like the fact that the stages create these wild packs in the middle of the race. Sure, great, okay? That's kind of exciting. The problem is when half the field gets torn up on each successive big one, you're left with a situation where you've got 15 cars who are unscathed in that last stage, and they're not going to race until 10 laps to go. And if you're expecting them to race, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. This is the big problem, especially with the stage caution. But I'm starting to think even awarding points in the middle of the race, at least on the plate tracks, is absolutely ridiculous. You're asking for wrecks. You want to cause wrecks. This is where we are now. We're wanting to cause wrecks. Is that what NASCAR is? Is that really what NASCAR is? Is it not about racing? Is it about wrecks? I cannot believe it. So a couple things I do want to talk about the race specifically. Danica Patrick's last race. Hey, you know what? She was driving the perfect race for this race. She was staying out of trouble. She was staying at the back of the pack, or at least the back of the lead draft. I shouldn't say at the back of the pack because that'll sound like I'm belittling her. I think had she not gotten taken out in the Chase Elliott accident with Brad Keselowski, it really was Brad Keselowski's fault. But if she hadn't been taken out in that accident, I think she would have been in with a shot at the end of the race. And if you think about it, she was an RCR-affiliated car through Premium Motorsports. You got to think that Bubba Wallace and her, along with Austin Dillon, would have been right there at the front at the end. But her NASCAR career ends in a crash. The Fox Sports coverage. This is another big-time negative. This was terrible. Wow, it was bad. The direction was maybe the worst I've ever seen. They missed about every wreck they could have possibly missed, and it's amazing because they seem like they're wrecking every 5 laps. You don't have a camera trained on it immediately. They cut away from cars clearly half spinning out. Their onboard cameras are terrible. They need to go find empty box and ask them what field of view means, because their little narrow field of view that they've got on the onboard cameras is awful. It's so bad. You can't see anything. The onboard cameras are just trash. And the commercial breaks. I couldn't believe the commercial breaks. They took a commercial break with 14 laps to go. And I'm like, okay, I get it. They're probably not going to race till 9 laps to go. But really, you're going to take a commercial break with 20 laps to go in the Daytona 500? Just really, really. And just Darrell Waltrip and Michael Waltrip as well, they have overstayed their welcome. They're really butt kissy, and I mean Jeff Gordon and Mike Joy I like quite a bit. And here's the other thing about the 3-car winning. I do want to mention this because it really does pain me as well, because this was a pretty good feel-good story if you think about it. I mean, the fact that Mike Joy could bring his 20 years of trying back as the call to bring the 3-car back to victory lane is fine. I mean, it was an emotional moment. I sure do wish Austin Dillon had been able to find a way to complete that pass cleanly. But, again, I guess that wouldn't have been as good of a show. Just really, it's very depressing to talk about this. I will talk about one positive. I'm going to leave you guys on a positive. If you've stuck around this time without leaving me too much of a hate comment, I really appreciate it. But Bubba Wallace, I know I'm wearing a Kyle Larson shirt, but Bubba Wallace is now my number one favorite NASCAR driver. I know I make fun of bandwagoners, and I'm going to bandwagon a little bit on Bubba, even though I've been a Bubba fan for a little while, and I certainly think he really showed some real promise. I know it's a plate track, and a lot of times you look at a plate guy and they're really good on a plate track, and then they go to Atlanta and they suck. But his charisma, his attitude, his comment at the end, the Adderall comment about Hamlin, I mean, that's what has been missing from NASCAR for a very long time. A true character, somebody who is willing to mix it up, and someone has the skill to back it up. And certainly it helps that he is also a new face for the sport in many ways, because, of course, he is African American. And that is a big deal, even in 2018, for when you consider that he's the second African American driver in the Daytona 500. I think, boy, don't you wish he had won? What a class act Bubba Wallace is. I think there are really good things in his future. I'm certainly hoping, and I will certainly be watching his career with very closely, because I think he's stellar. Really a potential future star for the sport. And if NASCAR is smart, they will put him on every billboard, put him in every commercial, because he's the guy. He's the guy. But yeah. So, in conclusion, if you thought this was a good race, that's okay. But just keep in mind that you and I are diametrically opposed on our viewpoints on NASCAR and what it should be. And if this is what NASCAR is, it's what it is. It's unfortunate. I think NASCAR can be better than this. I really do. But it's I'm not too pleased with what happened tonight. I feel like it's much more of a black eye than a positive. I know there are some storylines, but I will say this, is that kind of going back to Fox Sports, is that you definitely saw that they really tried to control the narrative right there at the end. They didn't show a replay of the crash for a very, very long time. It was much more focused on the triumph of Austin Dillon rather than the way that he won it. And I think that was very telling. It's very telling. I'll just leave it at that. So sorry if this triggered you. I'm sorry. I tried to keep it as cordial as possible. I tried to keep it as objective. I mean, as kind as I could. I don't want to talk too much trash, and I certainly hope I was able to get my point across well enough. I know there's a lot of people as well that will think that, hey, well, the 1979 Daytona 500 was like this, but that was a different time, a different era, and there were a lot of different factors that contributed between that and this. So yeah. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. This was I would say it was a dark day in NASCAR. We'll see if that's what the general consensus is. But thank you guys so much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope the discussion will be thoughtful. I hope there will be some consideration as to what your exact thoughts on this are, because I think there's a lot of different ways this can go. I'm sorry again, just that this isn't a glowing positive review. I know a lot of people would like me to come out here and say it's the best race ever, but it just wasn't. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and we'll see you in the next video.